So Ford has had a very bad week with multiple issues coming up all at the same time, and they're all their own fault. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I'm John, and recently they had a investor call, and several issues have all kind of come together at the same time. Ford is trying to deal with all of these, but they've been left behind in the automotive world right now, and it's a little bit of a surprise to me personally. Now, as you know, I am a little bit of a Ford fan, and their strong products and their strong sales have kind of masked a lot of these issues. The first is they're the most recalled brand for 2 years running. Now, I don't follow recalls very closely. All brands have recalls, and I just don't follow it. And I did a video about, I believe it was the 2.7 liter engines for Ford catching fire, which they blamed on a worldwide supplier giving inadequate valves, I believe it was. But that is one part of a bigger problem, and it turns out they've had a ton of recalls, and they are, we're number one in something, and it's recalls, and it's for 2 years running. Number two is, in this investor call, they talked about missing out on about $2 billion in profit. Now, they made a ton of money, but depending on whether it's before taxes or not, they either made money or lost money. It's accounting math. But basically, they missed out on about $2 billion profit, partially because of supply chain issues and partially because of inefficiencies. So they could have made a lot more money. And this actually, because of profit sharing with the UAW, means that Ford UAW members are getting about $3,000 less per year as a bonus than GM UAW members. This is pretty powerful when you're trying to recruit the best people. But on that same call, they also talked about the MachE, and that is that Ford was trying to design a new EV. And there's always a learning curve. I get that. There's always a learning curve. And Farley said they have 1 mile of wiring they don't need, which adds about 70 pounds of weight to the car. Okay, so I kind of get that. And that tells me it was rushed. They didn't have the time to stop and say, okay, let's re-engineer something to make it more efficient in terms of the use of materials. That tells me it was rushed. That's important. We'll come back to it. Number four, that Ford is using 25% more engineers for these results. So being the number two most recalled, using more materials than are necessary, and missing out on profit because of inefficiencies, they're saying they're using 25% more engineers than their competitors to get the same results. But they're not getting the same results. So I don't think it's fair to blame the engineers here. I have an engineering background. I'm going to take the engineer's position. But this sounds mostly like a manufacturing and supply issue more than anything else. But they're promising up to about $2.5 billion in cost savings, which includes staff. And well, connect 1 and 2 here, and you're going to end up with more engineers being laid off. So I think this all boils down to, before I get to my final point, of leadership comes from the top down. And I kind of like what Ford is doing. I kind of like Farley. I kind of like their product mix. And they've come out with some big hits. They've got the MachE, they've got the Maverick, they've got the Bronco Sport and the Bronco. But everything seems to be done slightly wrong. Like the Maverick specifically, it's a hit, and man, if they could produce about 250,000 of them, I think they could sell them, but other issues have held everything up. And the products that they are releasing are having recalls, inefficiencies, slow deliveries, dealer markups, and they're missing out on profit while they're paying engineers to get hopefully the same results as everybody else. Don't buy that they need to cut the engineers, because this is a structural issue. This is a management issue. This is a workflow issue more than anything. They have a problem. There's no way around it. They have a problem. And Ford of Europe is already talking about layoffs. We're talking about 3,000, maybe 8,000 layoffs in the near future. But they've got to streamline their workflow and empower the engineers and empower the people at the factories, the management, the manufacturing staff, the workers, to produce the best quality product along the way, while fixing their supply chain issues as well. I think Ford has a very bright future, and they have raised their profile around the world, and they are pushing things out there. And in China, they lost a ton of money while Lincoln was still profitable. But I think they're pushing a lot of good products out there. But when they talk about $2.5 billion in cost savings, does anyone really look at a Ford interior right now and think, oh, yeah, there's a lot of money to take out of that? No, Ford's already putting in some of the cheapest interiors, but they're doing it in a very stylish way, which kind of masks their cost savings. It reminds me of the 90s a little bit. I don't think the engineers are to fault with manufacturing issues, which may result from a separate global supply chain issue. Ford has the products, but it feels like they're not refining them. They're not making them the best they possibly can. They're making them to a price point and trying to get as much money as they can. And now for them to come out and say that they're leaving money on the table, part of that is they're overstaffed because their structure is inefficient. But part of that is they're buying their way into markets where their products aren't really competitive. And specifically, I want to talk about that Model E and the 1 mile of wiring that adds 70 extra pounds. It's easy to write off 70 pounds, right? When you're talking about an EV with thousands of pounds of car and battery. But it matters because that 70 pounds is half of a person, 1/3 of a person sitting in the car. It's an inefficiency, and that tells me that they're rushing things out to the market. Ultimately, I think that Ford's biggest problems, other than inefficiencies in the system, and I do believe in Farley, I do believe he will fix this and he will address it as the CEO. But ultimately, when you look at Honda partnering with GM and partnering with Sony, and Toyota, and they're dragging their feet on EVs, but talking about hybrids and other fuel mixes, and VW, and their huge press into EVs, and GM with their Ultium platform, and everything they're coming out with over the next few years. Where's Ford? Now, they've made some splashes, right? They've come out with the MachE, which is a pretty competitive product. I kind of like it. They've come out with the Ford F-150 Lightning. And I'm here to tell you, if the MachE has a mile of wasted wire in it, how much does that F-150 Lightning have? Nobody said yet. But where's their discussion of an earth-shattering, world-changing platform? I haven't seen it. Ford, the leader for 100 years in manufacturing and in platforms and building a world car, they're putting out random individual models, but they're not building any excitement about what's coming and what they're working on, what's behind the scenes. Does Ford even have a plan for the next generation EV that will underpin a bunch of their cars? GM is out there shouting about it. And I'm pretty excited about the Ultimate platform and seeing what comes for the next year or two. But Ford's been kind of quiet. Farley has a lot of things to fix here in terms of efficiency for the products they build right now. But I think he also has a problem with what's next. The press releases, the building excitement, the Ford is an innovator and we're going to tackle the best in the world. We're going to tackle GM and VW in an EV platform, but I haven't seen it. I think Farley has a lot to deal with here, but most of this seems to be a manufacturing issue and a supply chain issue, but I'm afraid the axe is going to fall on these engineers. And I think that is unfair because engineers who have struggled to get something put together, that's a management issue, not an engineer issue. I wish them the best. I believe in them in the future. But by gosh, other than this investment call, I want to see some vision from Ford. Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks.